I think it's going to make me use computer audio. Hold on. Okay. Hopefully it'll work out. So yeah, sent out the update with the new meeting. Made sure to check the box. Sent another one last night, so I appreciate everyone being here. Well, my name is Nick Hodges. I'm the founder and CEO of Halcium Energy. Started the company technically in 21, but it's something I've been working on since maybe 2014, a little bit before that. Kind of the story of how we got started was I was looking for a wind turbine myself. I had a buddy actually come over, and his favorite show was The Walking Dead. If any of you know what that is, it's an older zombie apocalypse TV show. Not my particular cup of tea. He liked it, but the point is I remember watching it and thinking just how kind of reliant modern society is on electricity. Basically, if you don't have electricity, you can't participate in the modern world. You wouldn't be having this phone call, email, internet, YouTube, all of it, even down to the appliances we use every day. If you ever lose power randomly throughout the day, you realize how dependent you are on it for everything. So I started looking for what ended up being called distributed energy for my own home. So a lot of solar panel options, great options, battery storage. Even back then, there was decent options, a lot more today, but not a lot of wind turbine options, at least none that I was interested in. You can go on Amazon today and buy a wind turbine for, $100 or whatever, and put it on your roof, but yet nobody does. I'd be willing to bet we've all seen solar panels on top of a house or a business or a grocery store, but very rarely do we see wind turbines, especially in towns and cities, and especially on rooftops. Really only ever see them countryside, maybe on driving somewhere. And why is that? And so began to look into it, got involved with a lot of wind projects. The most thing I got involved with was something called a solar updraft tower, which is just the absolute opposite of rooftop wind. It's a structure, it's about twice the size of the Empire State Building, or about 2.25 Eiffel Towers. And it's a giant cylinder. You build it in the middle of the desert and surround it with a mile of canopy 10 feet off the ground, and the sun warms up the air between the canopy and the ground, and it gets sucked up this tower in the middle, and it's supposedly to produce base load wind power. So base load meaning, you could power a city reliable with it, whether or not the wind was blowing, because it's the temperature differentials between the heated air, between the canopy and the ground, that rises up the middle. So started reaching out to a lot of people. They were a pilot project in Spain. Talked to a lot of people, the engineers who were involved with it, some of the business people, kind of what their feedback was. And I thought it was really interesting. Got involved with a couple of groups. One wanted to build another tower here in the U.S., here in Salt Lake. My fellow Salt Lakean, we have a giant smokestack tower to the west of the city, out by the Great Salt Lake. And there was a group that wanted to basically turn that into a miniature solar updraft tower. It's a horrendous idea, but it was interesting at the time. But I was talking to one of the entrepreneurs here in Salt Lake, and he said basically it was $1 billion project back then, so it'd be $2 billion now. And I kept saying the same thing: you have to de-risk it, de-risk. No one's gonna risk $2 billion for something that is just an idea, kind of. So I don't know how it happens, but between that meeting and looking for a wind turbine of my own, ended up prototyping different ideas, basically combining the lessons learned from the engineers from the solar updraft tower, combined with some other ideas that I had seen other people use, even going back to some technologies that are 3,000-4,000 years old, and try and finding a way to kind of mix and match these different concepts and products that have been used throughout history into something that I would be interested in putting on my roof. And that's how we came up with the turbine. The very first one that we released, it was kind of worked, headed in the right direction, but at the end of the day, it was just a hunk of plastic sitting in my garage. I wasn't sure if anyone would be interested in it. If they saw it, if they think, that's a horrendous idea, who would do that. So before moving on, I decided to show it to people, and the only way I could think of to do that was Kickstarter. So it would have been, I think, 2020, maybe 2021. Did a Kickstarter and ended up selling $48,000 of turbines in 48 hours. That was kind of the moment, when we realized that, hey, it's not just some random thing sitting in my garage. It's something that might actually be useful for the world and uh, might be worth pursuing. So from there, ended up moving to the Regulation CF, Regulation Crowd Fundraise on WeFunder, where most of us met. And been using that money for the last 3 years to basically prototype as far as we could. The original plan was to hire outside engineers early on. But I don't know what it was, about 21. People were too busy. They had too much business. I looked everywhere. The best quote that I got was from a company out in Kansas. They would be willing to run one CFD model, that's computational fluid dynamics, basically a computer simulation of wind flowing through the turbine. They would run one run for me and give me feedback on it, and it cost $120,000 a run. Just not what we were looking for, not the right type of partner. So ended up moving forward on our own. Just basically in a small shop, building things, testing them, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't. A lot of things didn't work, but enough things did work that we ended up moving forward with a lot of different versions to the final one that we launched in 24, which is the one we used for the second Reg CF race. That was the last publicly released model that we have. And ended up at that time hiring a group in town, got introduced to an engineering group called the Spiritu. They are a third-party engineering firm, exactly what I was looking for. They basically specialize in taking products from idea to commercialization. So they've done things in medical devices, they've done things in consumer goods, and they even had some tech that was part of the F-35 program for the U.S. Air Force. So really good people, really strong partners. I believe strongly in the mission of clean energy. Kind of their motto is no trinkets, so they don't do any sort of, goofy apps or goofy trinkets. Maybe they'd be useful, but their motto is high impact only products. So very good partners to have, very talented team, multidisciplinary engineering team, mechanical, electrical, aeronautics engineering, and then also industrial designers. So not just making something that's functional, but has good form as well. So that's where we are now. They started with a feasibility study. Basically, can we take this design that this guy's brought us and could we commercialize it, make it competitive in the market? And we currently ran a marketing report. So hired a fractional CMO. We've had a lot of different people reach out to us, whether it be companies, governments, even we've talked a couple times to, there's a branch of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of the UAE. They basically invest in technology that's going to be post-oil. So right now they have a lot of oil, and that's where they generate their revenue. They're taking that money, putting it into Sovereign Wealth Fund, investing in things that will keep the UAE relevant in the world post-oil. So we talked to them a couple of times even. They were interested early in just a really early conversation about an acquisition down the line, possibly. The point being is there's a lot of people who are interested, if we can get it to work. So she reached out to those people and figured out kind of why they were interested, why they had reached out, what it is they were looking for. And we've kind of combined those two reports, the data from the feasibility study and the feedback from the market research report, moved to optimization, which is where we are now. The Reg CF we're currently running basically allowed us to move to that and pay for it in its entirety. And at the end of April, that should be done. And we're looking forward to what is expected to be the last prototype. The final form, schematics, drawings, details, most importantly, a power curve. So how much power is generated at any given wind speed and all of the underlying mathematical support. So for any nerds in the audience, basically all of the data that you would need to see how those calculations are reached and how the power curve was derived. And then from there, it gets a little bit interesting. Engineering is very expensive. So I put out in the last update, basically this year, we are looking to starting to bring in additional partners to finish engineering, finish prototyping, and get this thing out in the market. They've quoted up to 24 months for that, and a significant amount of money. So that's what we're doing now. This Reg CF has been instrumental, though, I'll say, in basically getting us to this point and to the point in April. So for everyone who's participated, either in the first or second raise, thank you very much. This would not have happened without you. The biggest thing I think from WeFunder in the community is, and the community itself, being kind of an entrepreneur can seem like a very one-person activity, even though we have people helping, we have advisors. I don't speak to them on a regular basis though, so having a community of people who are kind of in the same mind of pushing that vision of smart cities, where structures themselves become power plants and not just regular structures themselves, but no matter where power is coming from, a power plant, basically creating cities that are somewhat capable of generating their own power. And because a lot of things can go wrong from a plant to a house, from a plant to a grocery store. So that's kind of the vision, is to help with that one component of smart cities, having solar, having wind, having battery backup to store the power that's generated throughout the day and night, we use when it's needed, and help individuals even become more self-reliant, which is why I built the thing in the first place. So I appreciate everyone joining. That's kind of the backstory on where we are, what led us to this point, what we have going forward. The 2025 update that I sent out, kind of where we're headed in the future. So the last month has been incredibly busy, which has been great. It's better to be busy than not busy for sure. So a lot of people are very excited about the turbine. It's a little bit early in terms of data though, which is why it's a very important milestone ahead of us for April to have that optimization report and the power curve and the math that supports it. Then it's not just, the kind of the idea of the founder and the early testing of the founding team, but we have actual third-party data kind of support some of these conclusions where we're going forward. So with that said, the main purpose of this is to give you all a chance to ask questions. Questions are great, where we're headed, anything that you might be interested in seeing from the company. This is probably my first time doing one of these, so we'll see how it goes. Excellent, I have one. I believe this was the Australian. Says timeline is very optimistic. New product commercialization 5 to 7 years. The faster you push it to the market, the more immature the product will be and higher maintenance and support. Okay, very, very thoughtful, I would say. It sounds like you've probably been through this before. So for 2 years of commercialization, yes and no. So 2 years until we have a manufacturable prototype. We can take it to manufacturers and start getting them built. So from there, are we able to get enough validation within the next 2 years? So it won't be, I guess, 2 years until we have the first prototypes. I don't know if it'll be 12 or 18 months and then 6 months of testing and validation and then ready to go, or if it would be 12 to 18 months and then 6 months of testing, then we're ready to manufacture, and then we continue to test for another 6 to 12 months. It just depends on how things go over the next 24 months. It will not necessarily, I think no matter if you launch a project that is novel of any kind, you're just definitely going to have some growing pains. I will tell you, we won't be the first to market. There's a company out there called Ventum Dynamics. They are already through R&D only because they finished R&D like 20 or 30 years ago. So their turbine is 20 or 30 years old, but they shelved it when they finished it because they finished, basically a novel rooftop turbine and no one cared. They have recently brought it out of storage because they feel like the time is right globally for this type of turbine. So they are in pilot programs. They probably won't be ready for another year or two. Their website is fairly big because honestly, they probably don't know exactly either. So I think 2 years to get to manufacturing, to get a fully validated product that may need more testing is not as optimistic as one might think. In fact, I wish it were sooner. And we'll work with the engineers to push out as quickly as we can. However, what you're talking about is losing market confidence. That's, I think, more of a service and sales side. So we have a go-to-market plan. It's based off of companies that have also launched relatively complex engineering projects. So products that take a lot of education, a lot of support, not just from salespeople, but sales engineers who would be able to not just sell the turbine, but help people on the technical side for installation and beyond. So I think that plan is targeted at what you're talking about. So it's a good question. Definitely comes from a point of experience. What do you expect for max effect? I believe you're probably asking about power output at wind speeds. That I don't know. That's a function of the ultimate final size of the turbine and then how efficient it is. So in terms of efficiency, there's a theoretical maximum limit. It's referred to as Bettz's limit. You can get 59% efficiency. Most rooftop wind turbines are going to be in the 30s. You might have to see some a little bit higher, but most are going to be in there. Vertical axis blades, the ones that don't point at the wind, they point up. Those are generally going to be in the 20s and 30s. Generally speaking, those are thought to be the future. Vertical axis turbines, the future of distributed energy. So you probably won't see them 200, 300 feet tall on the side of a hill like you would a horizontal turbine. The efficiency of the three-bladed horizontal turbine just cannot be overcome. Millions and millions and millions of labor hours have gone into making them more efficient over the last 50 or 60 years. But in town, vertical axis is expected to be kind of the future. And then the shrouded turbine is kind of the answer to the social impact and the safety impact. So you can go online and see all kinds of news stories of, actually in Australia, it was one of the biggest ones. I actually borrowed some of their video for our WeFunder campaign. This guy put it was probably a 30-foot sweep area turbine. It was big. It was probably 10, 20 kilowatts in his backyard in some neighborhood in Australia. And it made like international news because of how upset people were over it. So the shrouded turbine, which is that shell of our design, is kind of our answer to the social aspect of it. Because again, you can buy these turbines off of Amazon for super cheap and put them on your roof, but nobody is doing it. Why is that? I think it's because people are not satisfied with the solutions that are out there. Vertical or horizontal axis otherwise. The open blades, I think, present an enormous social obstacle as well as safety. Visual pollution is the term for it. So it's not polluting necessarily like smoke, but if you look out your window and all your neighbors have spinning blades, it's obnoxious and people don't care for it, to the point where they will actually get them taken down. So that's kind of where the shrouded aspect is. All right, wondering about size, would support a home, say 2,000 square feet. So what we're targeting is an output of anywhere from 1 to 2 kilowatts. So generally speaking, that's 1 to 2 kilowatt hours every hour, assuming that the wind is blowing at sufficient speed. So a normal home, and I always have to look this up, I always forget what it is, but in the US, I believe the average use is 35 kilowatt hours a day. So if you had a 2 kilowatt turbine generating at that capacity for 24 hours a day, that would be 48 kilowatt hours in a 24-hour period. So in that respect, it would generate enough power. However, when is the wind ever blowing, 40 or 45 miles an hour for 24 hours a day? It's just like solar. If you get a solar system rated for, say, we'll just call it 8 kilowatts. It's only generating 8 kilowatts from about 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. only at the right time of year when the sun is directly perpendicular to the solar panel. and only during the day and only when it's not cloudy. So you're talking about basically building capacity in the home and diversifying capacity so that if you have a wind turbine, you can generate at night, but you also have solar panels working together. So one wind turbine, no, definitely not. Not even two or three. Just like one or two solar panels wouldn't be able to power your home. You have to use them in a group with other things. So this is meant to be complementary to solar. So in our hemisphere, in the northern hemisphere, if you have a south-facing roof, you put solar panels there. But then on the north-facing roof, you would put a wind turbine, so to diversify your power output and increase your total output throughout the year. Because even in California here, where it's great for solar, the winter is actually not a great time at all for solar. But it's a lot windier in Southern California, even in the winter, than it is in the summer. Our target market wouldn't necessarily be Southern California, just because it's such great solar growers down there. If you're looking at a $10,000 budget or whatever, you're probably better putting all of it into solar. But that's the idea. And that being said, I don't believe that the 2 kilowatt size would be appropriate for a home. I think it would be closer to a 1 kilowatt or a little bit smaller, just because it'd be really big. It would look kind of awkward. So we're looking at probably doing 2 sizes, a large size for commercial use, say like on the Amazon DC or a Whole Foods grocery store, and then a smaller one for a rooftop. That being said, I made it for me. I wanted something to put in my own house to complement solar and battery backup, so it's for me and for you as well. So yes, it's expected to be on a house as well as on a business. How will this be sold? So the business model calls for kind of a 2-pronged go-to-market. First, directly to people who want it, whether you be a business or a government or an individual. But the long-term play is how solar panels and distributed energy in general is sold today, which is through an installer. Unfortunately for residential, that's usually an obnoxious teenager who knocks on your door in the middle of the day and signs you up for a sale. But it would be professionally mounted, professionally installed along with solar. So we've talked to a lot of installers who are already doing distributed energy contracts, residential and commercial. For them, it's a really big value add. Again, for that reason, if you have a client who basically maxes out solar on the south-facing roof, that north-facing roof has lost revenue for them. So in this case, they're able to put 1 or 2 turbines on the north-facing roof and get additional revenue. If you're a customer, I'm from Minnesota. Actually, it's the lowest solar score of any state in the union. I think Alaska included even, but they have a really high adoption rate for distributed energy. That being said, it's also one of the windiest states in the country. My hometown, Rochester, it's on average the highest average wind speed of any city in the country. So places like that, if you have a $10,000 or $20,000 budget, are you better off putting it all on solar? Probably not. Probably some sort of a mix. So for a solar installer, it's a value add for them. That's the original go-to market. Mountable on a roof or tough at chimney. Roof, yes. I'm not sure about a chimney. Makes complete logical sense to me. But I don't think we would engineer specifically for a chimney. Do I envision only one needed per house? Probably not. Just like you wouldn't use 1 solar panel per house. You probably need an array of however many would make sense on a rooftop. You don't want to put, if you have a 20-foot roof line, you don't want to put 10 of them up there. You don't want to pack it in. You need to spread them out. So whatever makes sense for a specific install job. And this is one reason why pairing with installers goes well, because they would be able to use basically their intuition at the ground level, at the customer level, to say this is a 1 turbine house, a 2 turbine house, whichever. Minimum objectives for the power curve. Engineering. Okay, so for the power curve, what we're looking at is a rating cost of $1 a watt, which if you're getting it from an installer professionally installed, they like to 3x their cost of goods. So you'd be looking at $3 a watt installed. So a 2 kilowatt turbine would cost in the neighborhood of is at $6,000 installed. $3,000 wholesale, $6,000 installed. That is very much in line with rooftop solar. Rooftop solar prices right now installed is about $3. Some places as high as maybe $3.25, $3.40. Other places a little bit lower. And that cost is usually falling because it's a maturing technology, so they're taking advantage of economies of scale. Newer, cheaper forms of cutting silicone. I actually saw a guy who's trying to cut it at the atomic level with a neutron laser, so there's no waste. You can get a thinner wafer for no waste and less money. That idea has been around for, I think, 6-7 years. He hasn't been able to commercialize it yet, but they're called Rayton Solar. I think it's just Rayton now. I think they're trying to pivot over towards electronics now, actually. So competitive with solar is the answer to that question. If it's a little higher, we're looking at on the high end, maybe 450 watt installed. Right now, the only really viable option for rooftop wind is flower turbines. They're different. Their whole exterior model is a rotating spinning blade. That being said, they're a very beautiful design, I thought. I thought they did it very well. However, their only model that is price competitive is at $5.40 a watt just for the turbine. So I don't know what their wholesale business model would be, but you're probably looking at anywhere from $5 to $10 a watt installed on that end. So competitive with other wind objects, but higher than solar at 450 watt installed. End user pricing, oh my goodness gracious. Target gross margin. So we're looking at, just said, $1 to $1.50 watt wholesale, 3 to 450 watt installed. That would be from the dealer's perspective. Target margin would be 30%, give or take. That one's a little bit ambitious, I feel like, but we can look at the size of the turbine as it's looking, and a 2 kilowatt generator is about a certain amount of money. I mean, you could have a 2 kilowatt generator that's more than $2 a watt just for the generator. You could also get them for maybe $400 for a 2 kilowatt generator. It just depends on the end design and basically how many magnets and copper coils you need on the inside to take advantage of the design itself. So you wouldn't say, for instance, necessarily want a super expensive generator on the inside just because the design wouldn't be able to utilize the super expensive design. So that's what we're looking at right now. I will tell you that it's incredibly early to tell you that with a great degree of confidence. However, the end of April, again, with the optimization report, being able to look at the final form of the turbine, this is how much material is needed. It's curved versus flat, which is different manufacturing, shipping costs. Get a little bit better idea. But right now, that's what the target is. That's what we're looking for. Local limitations. So actually, it is amazing how many people we talk to from the Netherlands. I think there's a lot of people in the Netherlands, don't get me wrong, but I think proportionally, there's probably vastly more people that we talk to from the Netherlands than from other countries, even the UK, I would say. 1 second. The local limitations internationally, and the answer to that question is I don't know. One of the reasons we're looking at installers is because they do know. So they're already installing distributed energy on rooftops. They're reading blueprints for rooftop loads, and they're actually doing the installations for these things. Dealing with permits and regulations, that is one more reason why we're working with installers directly. Is the type of business model we're looking at. I'm going to be honest with you though, 1 by 1 by 1 meter, that's a very, very small build area. I think a Halcium turbine of that size would be incredibly small, incredibly low power. And I'm not sure if it would make sense in that regard. I can't say that with absolute certainty. Maybe it's amazing and maybe that's what it ended up being, but we need to follow the data on that one. Complement solar battery storage, yes, without a doubt. So true distributed energy. If we are talking, you want to be as independent as possible. You need to have solar panels, you need to have wind, you need to have storage. For example, Germany, Greece, Cyprus, and the Philippines have all put out calls for distributed energy power plants. So basically Greece and the Philippines, they have people who live on islands They don't have a really reliable way to get them power, so the government wants to build these distributed energy power plants on those islands. And they need wind, they need solar, and they need storage. The only reason we know is because people have reached out to us asking us if we wanted to be the wind portion of those bids. So to your point, yes, you need to have all three if you really want to be energy independent. Now, you don't necessarily have to have storage to have solar or wind. It's what we call direct grid tied. But if you really want to be energy dependent, you got to have all three. That is correct. Minimum wind speed, again, competitive with other units. I don't know the answer to that question. I will at the end of April. Trying to think if it's too early to give you guys a theory on minimum wind speed though. Less than an open-bladed, three-bladed turbine, or I mean more. Higher, you need more wind speed than an open-bladed, three-bladed turbine. So not as good, but hopefully very competitive with what's out there so far for rooftop units. Inverter for connection for batteries. So the output on these is technically called wild AC. And then each unit needs a charge controller, and I always get inverter and converter mixed up, but I'm going to call it an inverter to convert it to DC. And then it needs to go into a battery bank and then converted back into AC. It's going to be hooked up to a house. So yes, there is technology that's needed between this and whatever it is that you're using. It would most likely come with a charge controller and inverter. They're really cheap for these units, like $5 a unit. So everyone will most likely come with it. We would probably not put in battery backup into each individual turbine, only because it wouldn't necessarily make sense. If you're looking for like a building or a structure, whether it be a home or a business, you're going to have your battery backup in a room somewhere, and it's going to be pretty large, versus aggregating, 10, 20, 30 small batteries everywhere and then routing those to an inverter somewhere else. Oh, look, I can use scroll in the chat. Oh, it's way better. Desert areas. I get this question a lot, as well as salt water. The answer is it's a concern that is being specifically designed for in design, if that makes sense. If you're talking about like a windstorm in Phoenix, I lived there for a couple years. They're pretty aggressive. But if you're talking about a windstorm in, say North Africa or the UAE, those get absolutely crazy. Something to look at. Deterioration from salt water is another issue. And then again, I'm from Minnesota, so how it handles in snow is also something that's been looked at in the design. I cannot give you a for sure because that depends on material list and the final form that's being designed. Again, we'll have that at the end of April, which this We Funder campaign has paid for in its entirety. So when we get to the end of April, we have those numbers specifically because of what this campaign has raised. So if you've participated, again, this would not have happened without you. So thank you. Texas, you can contribute to the grid. So I would not. So basically, the question it looks like is, would I buy a bunch of these for a wind farm for the case of making money by contributing to the grid? That's how I read this question from James here. My answer to that would be no, only because you're never going to beat the efficiency of an open-bladed horizontal axis three-bladed turbine on scale. Oh, just for you, James. I mean, for you, again, the process would be, if you're looking to do it yourself, that would be one thing. But if you were just a random customer, having an installer coming out, looking at your house, looking at your roof, saying, I think ideally you could use 2, maybe 3, or 1, just depending on how big your house is, how it's shaped. I think even with 4 turbines, let's just say at 1 kilowatt, that's 4 kilowatts. Texas is super windy though, depending on where you are. Doing at 4 kilowatt hours every hour at capacity, probably a lot less than that at your average hourly wind speed. I wouldn't do it necessarily to basically contribute to the grid, if that's off the top of my head. It's an interesting question though. You really got my noodle cooking on that one. Um, I think for me, again, I built it for me to power my house, to charge my batteries alongside solar. I think that's the best use case for that. Optimistic than 18 months ago. Ha! You guys. Oh man, I tell you, I feel like the journey is super optimistic to super low to super optimistic, and that can depend on the hour. It seems like not just the day, but I will tell you, having these engineers on board, having kind of like that confidence of a very experienced team of multidisciplinary engineers and designers basically saying, yes, you've got something here. This is exciting. We're moving forward. It's not a guarantee. We could get to the end of April and they could say, hey, we thought we could optimize it, but we've really got to take a step back and look at the design, because maybe we need to make some large alterations. That's not where it's headed now. Right now, it looks like everything is on track and is looking really good. But having that kind of confidence of having that team in your corner is very helpful. In addition to that, the last couple of weeks, I think I said in the update, looking to bring on angel investors. It is in no small part because of generally speaking, they're relatively successful entrepreneurs themselves who decided to angel invest. So the connections from people that you get are just incredible. So having those types of people be excited when they see the turbine, being excited for the future of the turbine, kind of what it means in the greater scope of, I hate to get too existential, but society, if that makes any sense. That's also very encouraging, very supportive. So 18 months ago, it was just kind of a small group of us, but now I feel like on the regular, there's a lot of just really quality, high caliber people involved on a regular basis now compared to just a couple of years ago. So I appreciate you saying that. Aeromine. So I always get these two mixed up. I'm going to do a quick search on Aeromine, but I'm pretty sure I know what it is. But okay. So yes, Aeromine. I think just a fascinating piece of technology. It was, I think, created by a professor from the University of Texas. And basically, its focus is on the edges of flat roofed buildings. So think of a warehouse, an Amazon distribution center, a grocery store, to take advantage of wind coming up the side of the building. So it's very, very specific to that use. So specific, actually, it only generates wind when facing that direction. So it's completely directional dependent. If the building is facing west, you put it on the west side of the roof, and you only generate power when wind is coming from the west. But even in an area with a heavily predominant wind, you're looking at less than half the power of what we would be able to generate with a 360-degree collection. I think the science behind their technology is really good. I really like it. But I think that kind of super, basically 80 to 90 degrees directional dependency, straight east or straight west or whichever degree it's facing, is going to be an issue for them in the long term for greater commercialization. We have one Salt Lake person here. We live on the front of a range called the Wasatch Mountains, and there are canyons. Our mountains are really steep. So the canyons are short, and the air up the top of the canyons and the valleys is a lot colder. So it creates wind 24 hours a day coming out of the canyon from one direction. But again, it's a very specific use case. So I think it's a great piece of technology with a very specific use case. Let's see here. Increase of wind speed as it goes over the roof. Yes, that is, I would say, a key component. I would actually maybe discourage people from putting them on a pole like 50, 60 feet in the air. If you live in a place where that's possible, I would just go for the horizontal three-bladed turbine. I think you're going to get a lot more efficiency out of that in terms of bang for your buck, watts per dollar. But the design basically takes a disadvantage, which is operating in towns and cities where wind is bouncing off of rooftops. Open-bladed turbines have a very difficult time with that. So the design specifically counts for wind coming off of a roof or a side of a building or whatever, and turns it into an advantage. So yes, it is specifically designed to work with air coming off of a roof. Approximate minimum spacing. It would depend on your prevailing wind. If you have a very prevailing wind from one direction and your roof just happens to be perpendicular, I put more of them on there. But if it's, not as prevailing, I would put a fair amount of space. The reason is you're basically going to pay for a bunch of turbines that are interfering with each other. And that's not what you want. I mean, if you have budget is no concern of yours, then, that's great. You can put more on there. But generally speaking, even modern wind farms, one thing that they learned was they used to pack like commercial wind farms full of blades, and they actually figured out that they could generate way more power with way less turbines by spacing them out a lot more. So I wouldn't want to, four corners of a roof, like if you had a cross, something along those lines. Yeah, for sure. Timelines. Timelines of competitors, similar commercial products in the market, what can we learn from their launch, how do we compete from a price point of view? Good question. I'm getting froggier. I apologize. I got sick last week, and I have been trying to kick it. This is actually the first day in a week that I felt healthy. My voice, though, is a little bit iffy. So, flat out, we will not be first to market, and that's the way it's going to be. Especially now with this, I think they're out of the UK, not Aeromine, the other one, Centum Dynamics, because theirs was engineered 20 years ago. So they basically just need to go through pilots and get it approved, and they're good to go. In terms of price, none of them, thanks, James. None of them have released any sort of pricing except for flower turbines. Again, they're at $540 a watt for their most competitive one. I think we'd very comfortably be competitive with them price-wise. We'll have to see what they've put it out as. But looking at their design versus our design, we're not using considerably more material. Our material doesn't need to be a lot stronger than what they're using, I guess is what I'm looking at too. So I think we'll be competitive. And there's something that happened in the world within the last week or so, which is applicable here. And that is, I cannot remember the name of it, but Deep Shark or Deep Dive, or it's the Chinese AI that came out. Basically tanked NVIDIA's stock 20% or something like that in a day. I think it was 17%. So basically, DeepSeek, thank you, Rick. So basically, ChatGPT and Gemini, Apple has had Siri for 20 years. Facebook, they're all putting out AI. They're all developing it, and they're all leading, and then just randomly out of nowhere comes this other company that more or less, I haven't used DeepSeek. I use Gemini, but more or less has a product that kind of pales in comparison. So you have kind of a market that's been forged by these big names with a product basically getting the market and capital groups and buyers and users on board with this product and figuring out use cases for it. And out of nowhere comes DeepSeek and just basically tanks everyone that's in there and completely changes things. So being first to market isn't always the first time. I think what you're talking about is what we can learn from their launch. They're going to make a lot of mistakes that we won't have to make just because they made them first. But I think we're in a good spot where we are with the technology that we have. And I don't mean to disparage them. I hope they do very well and are successful as well. Because if you really believe in the mission of the company to change energy for the better, then, if they have a turbine that's competitive as well, every time they put a turbine on the roof, they're also furthering that mission. We want to win, obviously, but it's I like Ventum's design. Let's just say that. I hope they do well. Thank you, James. I appreciate that. I am, for the most part. Traveling for the last 2 weeks did not help at all. I hate flying. I like traveling, being in new cities. I love meeting new people. But getting on a plane anymore is just horrendous. Um, yeah, if you fly first class, good for you. That's much better. Coach these days, especially if you don't pay for an assigned seat, you always end up in the middle and just pray you're not sitting in the middle of an offensive line. Not a good time, but all right. Oh, thank you. What would the average lifespan of a unit be? How much maintenance we need, considering less than optimal place, considering it being on a less than optimal place to reach? So generally speaking, the generators on the inside, the actual things with copper coils and magnets, they have a lifespan of 20 to 25 years. So that's what we would be targeting. Maintenance, absolutely, it's going to need some form of maintenance. Every product does. But generally speaking, the idea is similar to solar. You put it up there and just leave it. It's going to get damaged. It's just the way it is. Trees are going to fall on it. We had a windstorm here not too long ago. We get crazy winds up in this part of the city, 100, 120 miles an hour, gusts into 150. We had a microburst, which destroyed a tree. And my next door neighbor, his house looked like it was in Fallujah. It had been completely peppered by bark that had been exploded and launched at 100, 120 miles an hour at his house. So when something like that hits it, it is what it is at that point. But regular maintenance, it's not expected to have to be maintained regularly. That's the expectation anyway. Will the design be done to commercial or industrial specifications? So that's a good question. I'm glad you brought it up. So you're looking at ISO specifications. That's where these types of things start, getting whatever specifications are applicable to both the product and its intended use. The engineers are designing towards that as well. We have a company out in New York, I think upstate New York, that I guess is really good with this type of thing. I don't know how you guarantee to get certified, but that's kind of what their claim to fame is. I guess the engineers have worked with them before, so they're going to do the heavy lifting on our end for that. It's also a key component in basically being able to get permitted to be on top of a roof as well. So, all right, I'm gonna look through the questions. If you have any more, feel free. I mean, if you have concerns too, startups are very turbulent, very unpredictable. You always have to have a plan, but you also have to be willing to pivot too. So if you have any questions on that, by all means. I think we have all the questions. All right, appreciate you, Gato. A lot of people from Australia, probably not as many from the Netherlands, but I think you guys are very well suited. I think you guys have a lot more wind down there on the southeast as well. Manufacturing where? That's a good question, Donald. And I can't believe I didn't bring this up actually. So I don't think I put it in the second video, but kind of the passion is local markets, right? So local people buying it, local people benefiting from its production. So starting out, looking at manufacturing primarily in the US, if not the US, and Mexico and Canada, although I don't want to get into it. It's just an absolute mess at this moment in time. We'll see what ends up happening. I think the president has already backed out on the Mexico tariff for at least a little while. Somebody made a joke that he put off the tariffs until after the Super Bowl so that we could get guacamole for the Super Bowl parties. Terrible joke, but I laughed. We'll see what happens there. We have a lot of, I guess, capacity, especially in the Midwest, in terms of the materials. So we're looking at the intrinsic material list, what it's going to be made of, what's going to require. We have a lot here. I don't disagree with you, Rick. At least I hope you're correct on that. So that's where we're going. The biggest concern is generators. I can't find any generators outside of China. If we need to go to China, that's what we'll do. But there is one company in the Midwest called Midwest Wind and Solar. I actually have one of their generators somewhere in here, but I called them I think 6 or 7 months ago, and they aren't making them anymore. So it's a start in the Midwest. We had a lot of people here from Europe, not necessarily here on the call, but in the group. I think there's a huge market in Europe, so eventually moving over towards Europe, probably in the Netherlands, also looking at Czechia or possibly Poland for manufacturing in Europe. So basically, if you're buying it, we want it to come from your local area, maybe not your state or even your country, but European turbines made in Europe, American turbines made in America, that type of thing. Motorized gates using solar everywhere. Yes, absolutely. So we've had actually 2 people, kind of not motorized gates, but fitting in that description of powering the thing that it's using. People wanted to put like a tiny one on top of a light pole. They do light poles for like college campuses. So they wanted to put one on top of a light pole and then put a solar panel on top of it just to charge like a small LED bulb. And then there was a telecom company from Scotland that wanted to use them to power equipment in remote areas. So in that use case of powering the thing that's connected to, yes, very much so. I think it would use a much smaller turbine than what we're looking at right now. Low cost Romania or Bulgaria. So I spent 6 weeks in Bulgaria. I loved it. A little town called Chisinau. Beautiful town, great people. We were actually there when they were accepted into the EU. And so they had a big party. It was a great time. Best pizza I've ever had. This tiny little pizzeria in a basement. I mean, you go down there, maybe it's a prison, maybe it's not. The best pizza I've ever had. They put some sort of cheese on it that tasted like pepperoni. It was mind-blowing. I actually checked on it the other day to see if it was still there, and I think it was. All right. All right, looks like we're winding down. We scheduled for about an hour. I really appreciate everyone joining. It really means a lot to me. If you have any other questions or comments, I think my email is on the website. If not, it's nick.hodges@halcium.com. I think you can get it through WeFunder if you need it as well. Donald, you email me from time to time. James, I think you and I have talked as well. So anytime you have anything that you want to run by me or suggestion, by all means, let me know. But in the meantime, I really appreciate everyone joining. Thoughtful, insightful questions. I appreciate them all. And yeah, until next time, I'll put an update out probably at the end of March. I might hold the update for March until we have the data from April, because that's the really big thing. If I do, I'll just let you know it's going to be delayed. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone joining. We're going to do this in the future. I've had a lot of fun, to be honest with you. You guys had really good questions. A really good community coming out of WeFunder. I got one guy who gives me a little bit of trouble, but I think he and I are on the same page now. He's just very passionate, I think, about the projects and wants to see moving forward, which is great. But in total, interacting with you guys as a community has been nothing but positive. So I appreciate all of you. But yeah, you want to do these again, email me, let me know. Get people asking about it. Probably won't be more than once a quarter, probably once or twice a year, just to let you guys know what's going on and to give you a chance to bring up some of the things that we brought up. So appreciate everyone. We're going to end the call. I'm recording it. There's possibly an issue with audio, hopefully not, but if there is, I apologize to people who weren't able to join. But otherwise, appreciate everyone being here, and I hope you have a good evening. Thank you.